Mabel Satterlee Ingalls was born August 13, 1901 in Great Neck, New York. Mabel, with her sister Eleanor, were the daughters of Louisa Pierpont Satterlee and Herbert Livingston Satterlee, and granddaughters of J. Pierpont Morgan. She was married to F. Abbott Ingalls in 1926 and had one daughter, Sandra Ingalls Van Heerden. In 1918, following her graduation from the Brearley School in New York City, she participated in a research project with the New York Zoological Society in British Guiana with Dr. William Beebe. This experience awakened her lifelong interest in science. She graduated in 1925 with a Bachelor of Science degree, earned her master's degree from Radcliffe Harvard Medical School in 1928, got a PhD in bacteriology and immunology from Columbia in 1937, and followed it with an MPH in 1954. For the next 10 years, she continued this interest through research and teaching at Albany Medical School. During World War II, she did medical research for the U.S. military and served with the UNRRA in Europe. In 1949, she began working with the World Health Organization and the United Nations, traveling extensively to India and Africa. In 1958, she worked with the Columbia School of Public Health and, following her retirement, became associated with the ISS headquartered in Geneva. During this time, she traveled to Hong Kong and Australia. For many years, she also worked with Margaret Sanger and Dr. Abraham Stone at the Bureau of Planned Parenthood in New York. Upon the death of her father in 1947, Mabel Ingalls acquired Satterlee, and in 1960 established the Satterlee Mansion Foundation with the intention that it should become an educational and historic resource. In 1989, she began working on a project with Mary Ann Chapman and the Environmental Education Program of the St. Mary's County Public Schools. This project involved the production by Focus Video Communications of 3 videos to be placed in all the county middle schools. The following segment with Mabel Ingalls was conducted on the front lawn of the Wharf House on May 25, 1990.
Mrs. Ingalls, your father bought Satterlee in 1910. What were your early memories of Satterlee?
Well, there's so many that it's rather difficult to pick. But to start off, I remember coming down from Baltimore by boat. We spent the night before in Baltimore and went shopping in the morning to buy the things that we thought we'd need, the groceries, because at that time there were very few good grocery stores around or anything like that. And we would then come down on the goods steamer, Annie Randall, arriving at the dock at 4 a.m. when my mother firmly refused to get up, get dressed and get off. And we went up to Benedict, where at the end of the journey of the boat, and she turned around and we got back here and got off at 4 o'clock in the morning. And were met by Mr. Knott with the carriage and pair and drove up. Later, when I was a bit older, and didn't come down with my parents because I was at school, but when I came down, I would bring at least one friend with me, and we came by train to Baltimore, and then took a train to Bowie, and then changed and got on another train that came down to Mechanicsville. And there we got on a 3rd train and came to the end of the line. I'm not sure what that was called now, I'll have to find out. And we met there. That was just 15 miles from Satterlee. So we had a long drive over with poor old horses and arrived here and were greatly rejoiced. My friends loved it. We had an old pair of riding horses that had been brought down here to end their days, but they were still good enough for us to ride around a bit. And we were just hacking around the roads here. And then we adored getting up early in the morning and going out crabbing. And one of my favorite memories is the 3 of us getting in a boat. I had 2 friends with me that time, and each of us had a crab net. and we were each poling with the crab net. And of course one was in the bow, one in the stern, and one midships. And usually we all saw crabs at the same moment and poled in opposite directions. And finally we did manage to get a few crabs, and we had them on the floor of the boat, bottom of the boat. Then suddenly around the corner on this early misty May morning came a very handsome blonde young man, very blonde and very handsome, poling his boat. And he said morning to us, and we said morning back to him. And he said, we said, are you catching many crabs? And he said, oh, I got about 6 dozen. And then he said, how many do you have? And we thought fast and beamed with joy because we could answer it truthfully. We said, we've got 6 too. And we had our 6 little crabs there on the bottom of the boat. We usually spend a month here and love to go over and look at what we call Lost Lake, the pond across the creek mouth, and love to swim off the dock. And occasionally we fish for some fish, I think it were called grunters, and occasionally we went out with Mr. Knott to get the rock that he caught in his nets, gill nets that he had strung across different places. And we loved the shad. Only I thought the shad here and the roe, I'm very fond of, but the shad particularly here didn't have as much taste as they did up in New York. I later found out that was because of the oil in the Hudson River. The shad had slightly more flavor. Well, when we arrived, of course, there was no indoor plumbing at all. There was a pump in the kitchen that came up from a cistern just outside the house, where there may have been some groundwater, but where it was mostly, I think, collected off the roofs and things. My parents had bought old-fashioned tin tubs that are still in the house, most of them, but that's all we had upstairs. And then after a few years, my father decided to install a bathroom, and he bought the fixtures necessary, and he had a little enclosure made on the portico, and it created great excitement. When the fixtures of the bathroom arrived down here at the dock, many people were around, and they all looked at them and they guessed what they were for. And they thought the bathtub, which was barely 5 feet, they thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever seen because it must be for 2 people. That was the only plumbing in the house for many years, and then I came along and put in several upstairs in places that I thought they wouldn't be noticed, taking over space that wasn't used for anything in the eaves and in the passageways. My father had a great friend, Admiral Noble E. Irwin, who was head of naval aviation, and he was stationed up at Annapolis, and he and his wife and daughter used to come down quite a lot, and he was the one who flew down here one day, and the war was just over, I think, but all the same rules were enforced, and this would be a rule today, I imagine. They don't just take any female up in any Navy plane. But he had a very good young officer flying him, and Father said to me, don't you want to come down and see Uncle Ted leave? So I said, yes, I did. And Mother didn't seem to have any idea of what was up. So she was left behind, and we came down, and I rowed Uncle Ted out to the little seaplane that was sitting there in the cove up there, and he said, well, how about you getting in and taking a flight first, and I'll stay here in the rowboat till you come back. So I did that. Father was on the shore, and of course knew he was going to do it. So I went up and flew around, and the sheep were so terrified. We flew quite low, of course, with a little seaplane. And all the farmers, all the people working any place that we flew over, came tearing out to look. They hadn't seen the plane over this part of the country.
How about some other things? Are there any other things we should know about you?
My fly fishing for salmon was mostly done in Norway. And in Norway, I chartered a boat one summer to sail and ended up by buying 2/3 of the boat, the former owner keeping the other third. And for 12 years, I went there every summer and sailed.
We're very fortunate to have Satterlee as an educational foundation for the students, and I know over the last years that we've been here, they have enjoyed it tremendously. Does this kind of fit your plans as far as what you thought it would be?
Very much. And anything that enlarges it from just a historic house, but tells a little bit about the land and the effect that the coming of the Indians had and the effect that the coming of the white men had on the land and what happens to it, I think is a very important thing.
On October 28, 1990, at a reception in her honor, the county commissioners, St. Mary's County Public Schools, and St. Mary's College of Maryland presented Mabel Ingalls with a plaque in appreciation of her contributions of Satterlee and the Educational Foundation. On December 28, 1993, Mabel Ingalls died at her home in Manhattan at the age of 92. The full interview with Mabel Ingalls and the 3 video presentations that were produced as a part of the educational project are available in the Satterlee archives.